Hello, and welcome to Adventures with ADHD, where we shine the spotlight on fabulous neurodivergent folk. And today I've got Nikki back with me again. She just can't keep away, which is
I can't.
wonderful because she has so many interesting things to talk about. Today's podcast, YouTube program is going to be slightly different. We are just going to free flow and talk and see what happens. With us talking, you never know what comes up. Isn't that right, Nikki?
Yes. So I maybe apologize in advance for anything that might come out.
So we let's get to a start. Nikki, it's nearly a year since you've
Mm.
been diagnosed. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. In February, at the start of February, it'll be a year. Um, in some respects, it seems like it was only yesterday, and in others, like there's so much that's changed and so much that's kind of happened. Um, but yeah, to kind of reach that year point has been quite incredible. It's the year point for my ADHD diagnosis. So I had my ADHD diagnosis in February last year, and we talked about this before, didn't we? So I had kind of gone along expecting the ADHD diagnosis, and the psychiatrist I had was just the loveliest, sweetest man, and very kindly explained to me that he believed I was also autistic
Right.
and was referring me for full ASD assessment. And that really knocked me for six because I hadn't really even considered that. I suppose I just, the words ADHD had been said to me. I'd gone down a rabbit hole and hyper-focused and researched ADHD, but not autism. And so that was really hard to process. And then I was actually really lucky. So my ADHD assessment I had through an NHS partner but paid privately, but my autism assessment actually went via the NHS, and I was told it was a 3 to 4 year wait. And at that point I thought, I don't know if I want to go through full diagnosis,
Yeah.
but I thought I've got some time to decide. And then I was fast tracked, and so that referral went through eventually in the April from my GP, and by mid-August I'd been through all of the NHS assessment for autism and being told I was moderately autistic. So I almost didn't have time to stop and think about, do I
No.
want the diagnosis? Because the wheels were in motion so quickly. And it's really challenging because it was like this huge relief of, oh my goodness, I get it. Like my whole life suddenly started to make sense and fall into place. But then I was just filled with this deep kind of sadness and confusion. And a little bit of me was like, how did I not know? And how did people around me not know?
Yeah.
And then you unravel the masking, don't you? You're way further down the diagnosis and experience line than I am. But it is, isn't it? It's a real
I
kind
think
of light bulb moment.
Yeah, and I think you do ask yourself, how did I not know? Did people around me not know? And the masking, I think, is such a massive part of it.
Mm.
And for those of you that are not sure what the term masking is, it's kind of covering up your true self in order to fit in, isn't it? So if you're really bothered by sounds, kind of not speaking up and saying that's too loud for me, and
Mm.
carrying on as if everything's okay. I mean, what are your thoughts on
Look,
masking?
we've
Oh,
got a little bomber. We've got a hello.
hello. Oh, look at him. Oh, and he's gone.
Maverick just came in to say hello. Um, yeah, I think the masking thing for me was really interesting, and being able to kind of stop and reflect on like so many areas of my life, and the kind of the extent I'd gone to appear what I considered was socially acceptable or normal. um and I think that this is like a multitude of topics in itself, isn't it, like the whole masking
Yeah.
thing. But I look back to the socializing element when I was younger. So I was thinking, well, I used to go out drinking, I used to go to nightclubs, I used to go to festivals, and I used to go out with friends. But when I stopped to reflect, I'm like, but I was drunk. So what? And I would drink before I went anywhere, because to be able to cope with that busy, noisy, intoxicating environment, I had to numb a bit to it. And I also, you know, that's a real realization of where being autistic and ADHD can be like living with two different people. Like we've talked about this before, you have that impulsive, like, yeah, I want to do it. And this is so exciting. I'm all over it. And that's the ADHD, like, woohoo, I'm up for anything. So I'd have a drink, go out, be challenged to a dare, like I could never say no to a dare. And fueled by alcohol and lack of inhibition, I would do it.
Yeah.
So I have that, like, I always think that's ADHD me, but then I have autistic me that hates noise, hates being around people, needs routine. Like, you know, I can't go to a restaurant without knowing, well, to be honest, I don't like going anywhere because I need to know what the set out is. How do I get out? What food will I eat? What will I order? I'm a classic of going somewhere and trying to nonchalantly go, oh, I don't know what I'm going to have. Having been online and studied that menu, like, and probably phoned the restaurant to check what they've got. But then, you know, it's that kind of tear between impulsivity and excitement and the need for routine and sameness and knowing what's going to happen, which then triggered loads of anxiety. And so I know that you're also autistic ADHD. So do you have that kind of battle almost with those two parts of you?
Yeah, I mean, I did for a long time. Like you said, I've been diagnosed for over 10 years now, but your story of going out was, it's just my story too. And I'm sure so
Mm.
many others, you know, yeah, I'm up for it. I'm going out. Woohoo. I was undiagnosed and unmedicated. I'm not medicated now, but I was for a while. So yeah, the alcohol was kind of a boost. It was fun,
Mm.
but it was also a form of self-medication, which is why so many neurodivergent people do have drug and alcohol
Yeah.
addictions. You can see how it happens, can't you?
Yeah.
And then it would numb the noise and everything. And what I really noticed was, because I used to be much more hyperactive, so the more I drank, the more I could kind of focus and not be bored. Do you know what I mean? So it was kind of
Yeah.
drinking yourself into oblivion, which is
Yeah.
not great, you know?
No, and I used to be like, go big or go home. That's what, you know, I was, and I never have been like a social drinker. So I'd never sit at home on my own and have a drink. But if I went out, you know, I would typically go out, I would have drinks before I went out. But it was just such that kind of, you know, I look back at all the situations I was in, and you know, my best friend at the time, so when I was kind of in my, I guess, late teens, early 20s, my best friend was a guy. And now I look back on our friendship and I can see the chances are that he was probably also very similar to me, because we really were both quite happy to kind of burrow ourselves away and be in our own little world. But to go out, we would have a drink, and then we would be like the life and soul of the party when we were out, and then filled with all this kind of regret and confusion the next day, because you're so out of your routine and you don't really remember what happened and you don't really understand the interactions or the boundaries of, and I don't know if you found this, of what's acceptable and what isn't. So sometimes some of the things that I would do impulsively were quite extreme, like quite larger than life. But then I would have that feeling of, other people don't seem to do that, or they're shocked by my behavior and they think it's funny. But then in my head, I'm like, it would be a confusion of, where are the boundaries? Like, what is a real friendship? What's acceptable? What's not acceptable? Which spiraled that part and actually could lead to a lot of anxiety. Did you ever find that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I kind of, I've always been a sensation seeker. So when I did silly things and everyone laughed, I kind of liked that and liked that feedback. I can't think of anything specific. I'm sure something will come that I've done. Um, but there is confusion as well the next day, like, oh my God, what did I do? Why did I do that? Why did I feel the need to go that
Yeah.
far? And it's a vulnerable place as well. That's, you know, people are vulnerable, even if they appear very able and articulate.
Yeah.
There's a real vulnerability there which people don't see.
And I think that's a really key point, isn't it? Because I think on that vulnerability aspect, I mean, I look back over friendships, but I think particularly relationships where, you know, I would try so hard to be the version of myself that somebody else needed from me. And I obviously reflected sort of since my diagnosis, and I look back through past relationships where I've essentially had quite controlling relationships with men. I was in a relationship with a narcissist for about 18 months. And because it's almost like you're a magnet for people that can spot those vulnerabilities and take advantage of them and gaslight you and kind of lead you to believe like that version of you isn't good enough. And because you're not really being your true self, I found it very hard to actually relax and be who I wanted to be and who I really was in a relationship. But it just seemed to attract people that would take advantage of those vulnerabilities.
Yeah, and I think the kind of people pleasing, not feeling good enough is what, I've had some relationships where the other person was cheating.
Yeah.
Didn't have the hard evidence, but when you know, and when
Yeah.
someone tells you as well,
Yeah.
and they still deny it. But because I had such low self-worth, I was like, well, this is all I deserve. I'll stay with her. Which now I'm like, what? But
Yeah.
when your self-worth is so low, um, you don't
But
stay,
I
well,
guess
you
it's
stay.
just kind of hearing you say that, it's also that part where because you're trying to be what you think is the perfect version of yourself and what that other person wants or needs from you, if that's not good enough, how will the real version of you ever be good enough? Like you put everything into being this, ideal person for your partner. And I think this goes into friendships as well. Like you try everything you possibly can to be that version, and if that's not good enough, I've certainly had that. Wow, like if they actually knew what I was really like, that's a whole new level of rejection, which then layers that need to kind of mask and people please, because then the next time, I've certainly found this, I'm in a situation with in a relationship or some friendships, I tried that extra bit harder to both mask and please, and I think over a period of time it just compounds itself.
Does, and it's so sad, like when you look back now, isn't it? And well, for me, looking back and realizing what's happened throughout my lifetime, because we've grown up with
Yeah.
autism and ADHD and not even known. I've been doing a lot of healing and grieving this past couple of months, actually, where it suddenly
Yeah.
really hit me like, oh wow, because I thought life was always supposed to be hard. And if it wasn't hard, then it wasn't worth doing. So to realize that that's not the case, that's a lifetime of struggle, a lifetime of fun and adventures, of course,
Yeah.
but really quite sad at the moment. And it's having discussions like this kind of highlights, doesn't it? The real, true vulnerabilities in friendships and relationships.
Yeah, and I mean that's amazing that like even so sort of far on after your diagnosis that you can still have these realizations as new experience come up, and you start to kind of dig a bit deeper, don't you? And just think, where does that all start, and how is it compounded? And then how do you unravel that and learn a new truth
Mm.
and a new way of being, which makes you vulnerable again?
Yeah,
Because you kind of putting forward a truer version of yourself. And I guess like we'll probably both look in 5 years time, and that will be an even more authentic version of ourselves, because there's so much, I'm 47, so there's so much to kind of unpick and unravel. And I still don't trust myself in friendships or relationships. So I've been single really for 3 years. So I was with somebody in prior to the pandemic, but we didn't see each other through the pandemic. So I'd say it's 2 years, but really three, because we didn't see them. I've got no desire to go back to dating, because I'm like, I don't know who this true version of myself is and how I show up in a relationship. But with friendships as well, like I look at how, I've tried to be, again, the version of myself that I think other people want. And what that attracts typically is people that take. So they're not interested in a two-way friendship. I would see them and all they ever talk about is their own problems. And you feel like you give and you give and you give. And then what I've realized I've done all of my life is I do that. I always say, like the little puppy dog bounding along, just kind of going, yeah, take, take whatever you want from me. But then when there is nobody on the other end, when I've needed it, it's like a puppy dog that puts its feet in the ground and skids to a halt and goes, no. And because I've never understood the boundaries, like having boundaries for me, it then becomes a light switch goes off. So I'm like, I can't have you in my life. Like I've got the rules wrong. I don't understand what the rules are. They're not what I thought they are. So I would exit. So I'm kind of at a point that where I'm learning a year into like being, with my diagnosis, how to create boundaries and how to show up with this massive vulnerable fear of rejection. Because if I show up as me, which I've never done before, what happens if that's not good enough?
Yeah, and I mean that's the sort of thing, good enough for who? Who is the person to be good enough for?
Yeah, and of course it's ourselves, isn't it? But when you've lived with kind of, and I guess I haven't really reflected on whether, had I have known earlier, would my path have been different? And that's impossible to know, isn't it? But I think now that I know, I can't unknow it, which is great. But it is that unpicking so much so you can start to kind of move forward in a really positive way. And that's for me when I was really lucky that you were recommended to me as my coach very early in my diagnosis, like 6 weeks after I was diagnosed, I think. And so you've been like a huge help for me to kind of come to terms with the diagnosis and to unpick a lot of this stuff. And I love that I can say things to you and we can talk about things and there's no judgment. We've had so many conversations where I'll say something or we'll do something that is, now I know very classically my autism or an ADHD, and you get it. And that's been such a safe space for me.
Yeah. What was it? We were talking about we were arranging a coaching session and you said, oh, I'll do it. I think we were doing a podcast episode on a Friday.
Yeah.
And you said, oh, we can do the coaching session on the Friday as well. And I was like, oh no, I only do fun stuff on a Friday. And then I was like, oh, sorry, that sounded a bit mean. And you were like, no, it's great, it's great. But someone else might have been like, well, that's not very nice. Oh, they're so rude. But you get
But
it.
I just laughed because I was like, how classic, because that's the sort of thing I would say or do. And we just had that ongoing kind of like, well, not on a Friday because that's a fun day, but
Yeah.
as if to say like we never had any fun when we spoke. But it's
Yeah.
not. And I think you just have that kindness and empathy, don't you? Both to yourself and others. And
Yeah.
I found that like with other people that I now either know are autistic or ADHD, or I believe to be, and I just have that softness. It's almost what was irritating in me or in other people previously becomes endearing, because you just think, I so get you. Like that's such a lovely quirk.
Yeah.
That knowing definitely brings that, I think.
Yeah. And a level, well, this is to work on, but that self-acceptance and self-compassion. I'm going to say things that come out wrong.
Yeah.
They're not intended wrong. They're not intended to offend. And that's what I always go back to. Like, if I think, oh my God, that was a bit offensive. Um, Actually, where am I coming from? I'm coming from a kind place. So with
Yeah.
that bit self-compassion you've got to look at where you were coming from. Because we can be so hard on ourselves, can't we?
And your comedy improv like really helped. Shall I share that story? The story after we had that
Oh,
comedy improv.
please
This is
do.
one of my like,
Oh,
I mean, talk about like, that comedy improv session was amazing for me because I'm somebody that if I've got to go somewhere, I'll plan out what I might say.
let me just interrupt. So for those of you that are listening and haven't seen the comedy improv special, do watch it because Nikki allowed me to teach her to do improv. She'd never done it before.
No.
Um, I mean, how brave is that? Allowed me to teach it and then show it to the world. And Well, Nikki's going to tell you what happened after she learned improv.
I'm not really sure the world would thank me for what I took away from it. I was a little overzealous in putting it into practice, but it was so empowering because I'd always thought, and I said this to you, like when I kind of knew that you were a coach and you did comedy improv, I remember thinking how I couldn't put my head sort of around how that would help with my like autism and ADHD, but totally lent into it when you said like, let's do it. Oh my goodness. So if I go into any social situation or any environment, really, I like to know who's going to be there, and I will almost rehearse conversations in my head that might happen. And if I go to places and those topical conversations come up, or I'm asked something that I'm not comfortable with, I would usually do one of two things. I would usually exit to the toilet, or I would blurt something out that was not relevant and usually highly inappropriate. And then I would feel awkward and everyone else would feel awkward, and we'd all just stand there and look at each other, and I would exit to the toilet. So that, you know, that either way, it wasn't a good situation. So when we did the comedy improv, I was like, this is amazing. Like, this really enables me to realize I can listen and respond and it's fine. Like, how wrong can I be? So our comedy improv session was hilarious and it was so freeing. And I typically, if I'm out and about, I usually phone my mum, because if I'm on the phone to my mum, I can't stop for small talk. Small talk makes me cringe. If I see somebody and I've got to have an awkward exchange, I don't want to do it. And so I phone my mum a lot. And then we'd had our improv session. I'm out walking this is in the summer one morning, and I see my friend and his wife, and I'm like, oh, and I'm like, Mum, I'm just seeing a friend, I'm gonna go. So I hang up the phone and I see my friend and his wife. I'm like, hi. And they say to me, oh, this is lovely. It's like in the Mediterranean. Everyone's out and about really early in the morning. We got up really early. We've come for a walk. What came out of my mouth was, I've been up since 3:30 because my next door neighbour's got a new girlfriend that thinks she's a low budget porn star, and they were up having sex all night. I see the look of horror, particularly on his wife's face, but that awkward moment, I don't stop there. I think they need more information. So I started to do impressions of the noises that she was making as a low budget porn star. I don't know where I got this from, because I don't watch porn, let alone low budget porn. But those were the words that come out of my mouth with a little impression of what was going on. And as I'm doing it, I'm thinking, shut up, just stop talking. And I kind of came to the end of my little, storytelling. And they just kind of went, right, yeah, so like, really good to see you. Have a good day.
We like
we parted company. And so usually if I like pre-diagnosis and pre us kind of doing that kind of improv, I would have been mortified, and I would probably have got home and multiple texts to my friend going, I'm so sorry, I was tired, I don't know where that came from. I walked home laughing my head off. I was like, that is genius. I'm like, I didn't hurt anybody. My intention was good. I wanted to stop small talk. I'm a bit crap at it, but I thought I threw myself into, like, with all of the enthusiasm that maybe shouldn't have been there. But it was so freeing to kind of then go, it wasn't an ideal conversation in the first experience, but I was so kind to myself and I laughed. And then I texted you, didn't I? I said, oh my goodness, I took this improv way too far. But it was amazing.
And the whole thing is amazing. The fact that you said, right, Mum, I've seen someone, and then you were kind of happily, this was after a 20-minute improv session, happily go and talk to your friend. Then all that came out of your mouth, which is pretty hilarious. But I think the real key is you were felt free to do it, and you didn't beat yourself up. This is part of how you get to a really good place, isn't it? So what's changed for you now in terms of not having, beating yourself up and stuff? Not literally.
I think, well, actually, you say not literally, because just on a really quick aside note from that, in the last year, I'm just trying to think, have I had any autistic and ADHD meltdowns. So what would happen before is I would have meltdowns and I would hit myself. I think I've said to you, and this is me being really honest, because it's not something I've really openly shared, but for me to deal with that burnout and overwhelm, I would often just repeatedly hit myself in the head until that tension had gone.
Yeah.
I've not done that. I have had burnout in that I've been exhausted and I have felt really overwhelmed, but it hasn't got to that point because I have that knowledge and that kindness and understanding. I can put things in place that support me better now. So I'll recognize the burnout and take some time off. I will do something that feeds my soul or makes me feel good and relaxed. But there are so many things, I think, that have changed, and that self-compassion and that self-kindness and the ability to when I do something. So there's a couple of things, like if I say something to somebody that they might take offense at, I will sometimes say what I'm going to say and just say, look, I really hope this comes across okay. I'm autistic and sometimes I don't quite put things in a way that are received well, but my intention is always good. So please feel free to challenge me or ask me a question in a different way. That's been really good because I felt like I'm looking after myself, and I take away that kind of, if somebody is stung by something I say that's quite blunt or direct, it's just that openness. And I think, like we've talked about this before, I had major spinal surgery last June, and I went into that completely differently because I could explain my needs. I could talk very openly. I felt like I was being cared for because I was understood. And if something came up for me, I could advocate for myself much better. There have been lots of imperfect moments, and this is all like really big learnings. But it is really that self-compassion, self-kindness, in some ways boundaries, but I'm probably not there with that yet because what I've done is created a very, very insular world. And there's lots for me to still work on and grieve and process, but it's been such a positive experience having a diagnosis. And I know we talked about in one of I think it was the first episode, wasn't sure if I wanted a diagnosis. But actually for me, it really, really helped. It really helped give me the clarity and the ability to start to look at what I need, what I truly, truly need, and who I really am. And that is I'm very much at the start of that journey.
Yeah, it's a lot of reflection, grieving, healing, and then it happens over and over again. I think, like I say, 10 years on, and I've been working with a coach. She's a kind of spiritual business coach and mentor. And she's helped me so much to get to a place of vulnerability where I can address what's gone on. I kind of think I covered everything up pretty well with humor for my whole life. But now I'm kind of using the humor, still doing comedy, that's part of who I am and what I do, but in a different way, not to cover up, but to start to unpeel layers. I hate the word peel, it makes me feel sick. But
how did you feel when you got your diagnosis?
Well, it was a long time ago, but kind of, and I'd been researching 5 years prior, so I'd kind of accepted, like self-diagnosed, although that was a bit frowned upon back in the day, especially by the professionals, which probably still is, to be honest. But so I'd done 5 years of research before I'd even plucked up the courage to go for an assessment. So by the time I'd got there, I was hugely relieved. And just, I think understanding is key to acceptance. You don't know what your needs are until you start looking to who you truly are, do you? So it's been a real experience, and weirdly enough, I've only started talking about it the last couple of years So I kind of kept it to myself. So there was probably an element of shame. Well, not shame so much, but I had this big fear of judgment. So my
Yeah,
fear was, I'll say, and we've had this conversation,
yeah,
I'm ADHD and autistic. Oh, you can't be. You don't do this. You don't. So that
yeah,
stopped sharing. I'm now a different person, and I say it. And if somebody says that to me, I'll kind of try not to get annoyed and explain to them that there isn't a look. It's an
yeah,
invisible condition to an extent. But relief, I think knowledge is the key here, and acceptance. Sort of a lot of people don't really want to address it, don't want a diagnosis,
no.
and
And I
that's
think,
fine. Yeah, I think it's just key to understanding and acceptance. And everyone's got different journeys. Some people don't want to know themselves inside out. I think it just so happens that we are very into personal development, aren't we?
mm,
And I think maybe that could be a subject for our next chat, our
yeah.
trip
Uh,
to see Gabby Bernstein.
oh my God, that was yeah, we'll definitely have to talk about that. I think that kind of issue around, or that concern around judgment, that's definitely been a thing for me. Like I've had friends that have not believed my diagnosis. I've had a family member that dismissed my diagnosis. And that's really difficult to feel like you've almost got to justify like what it is that you've that you've got this diagnosis and why it affects you. And I still, to be honest, I still feel like that
Yeah,
now,
yeah,
because and I've thought about that a lot, because I thought, why do I care?
mm,
But then I think when you're somebody that spent your entire life trying to be a version of yourself that is acceptable to other people, I don't think that just goes. I think that fear of judgment actually rolls into a fear of rejection and not being good enough. Like if you felt like you weren't good enough or accepted with all of your best masking ability, that fear of like, well, I'm now going to be me, and what if I'm rejected or not accepted or judged or treated differently? um that's really powerful, and I think that has definitely and is still a really big challenge,
yeah,
really big. So I
yeah.
can see how that can affect so many people quite fundamentally.
Yeah, because it comes down to your core beliefs, doesn't it? Of like you say, not being good enough. So, but now, we can address what's going on. There
Yeah,
is there is light. But
there is, and it's
yeah,
exciting. And then that comes down to boundaries, though, doesn't it? And perhaps not having the right people in your life, because you will have attracted certain people, perhaps as a version of yourself that you presented. But when you really learn self-compassion, self-acceptance, what your needs are, and then have the boundaries and create your life around that, that's really, really powerful. But that's, it's not a overnight sensation, is it, by any
uh,
stretch of the imagination?
sure. Yeah. Oh, Nikki, I'm going to wrap us up there so that
Yeah.
our lovely viewers can take away all these golden nuggets of information. Thank you so much for coming on and speaking so openly and honestly. I know it's going to really help so many people. So, until next time, thanks, Nikki.
You're so welcome.